Welcome to episode 2 of my Doing, Being, Becoming, and Belonging series, inspired by Anne Wilcock. I'm an occupational therapist. Anne Wilcock created this framework, and I'm breaking it down. Also, practice for me to not censor what I'm saying, or I'm just going to talk and not edit anything, which is very hard for me. But if you don't know anything about what I'm talking about or who I am, just go back to the first episode if you care about that. If not, I'm just going to get right into it. So today we're talking about doing. We're breaking it down, and another inspiration of this series was this book. The only book I've read of Clarice's so far, because it truly rocked my world and actually kind of really made me practice some mental resilience after I read this book, because it did make me feel weird. I don't want to say sad. I don't want to say I don't want to put a label even on what I felt, but it made me feel contemplated in a different way. This book makes you think about things that you've never thought about before. Now, this series isn't going to be any kind of book review. I'm going to try to not spoil anything in any of the books that I talk about, but I am going to reference them and talk about them just enough that I feel like. So this photo here from this book, so what I will say about this book is that there's no plot. The plot of the book is that GH, we only know the name GH because it's on a suitcase, goes into this room and encounters a cockroach. And all of the thoughts that they have is from this encounter with this cockroach. And as I was reading it, I look over and yes, I know I need a vacuum, but my cat killed a cockroach. So obviously that made me pay attention. I'm big on symbolism in my life, and I don't think there are any coincidences. So that made me perk up my ears. So great book. And here is the quote that's inspiring this part of this series. If I hadn't needed so much of myself to shape my life, I would have already had a life. If I hadn't needed so much of myself to shape my life, I would already have had a life. We talk a lot about identity and meaning and purpose, but we don't really talk about what those things are and what they mean and how you create them, and are they important or are they not? And I struggle with this a lot because, as I've talked about in other videos, I've really struggled with my mental health. And I often debate if I need any kind of label, or what a label does for me, and does it open up my world or does it close off my world? And this quote was presented to me so beautifully because it is something that I think about a lot without having had said it so poetically. If I didn't think that I needed to choose an identity or label the identity that I'm creating, or think about my purpose, if I didn't spend time contemplating those things, would they have just happened automatically? So I think about that kind of thing. So here's what we're going to dive into in this doing chapter. What does what you do give your life purpose? Or does your purpose give you something to do with your life? Does it even work? Does it work inversely like that? That one leads to the other? You know what I mean? And whose purpose? Is it your purpose? What influences our purpose? How much does the society that we live in, the society that is run on money, if money wasn't a factor, what would your purpose be? You know, I think about these things often. Do you have to be healthy to live with purpose? Do you need to chase wellness, health? How much does that matter for you to feel okay, for you to feel good, for you to feel purpose and meaning? I've talked about these statistics before, so I'm just throwing up an older Instagram post here. And I've talked about it in other Substack episodes, just statistics. I don't want to talk too much about these, but I will throw them up on here. What I do want to really talk about, though, is depression, mental health disorders. So that's what I'll be referencing mostly when it comes to today and today's book references. But I also think about health and chronic pain and musculoskeletal disorders and longevity and health span, all these things too. So that is the greater context that I am acknowledging, but today we're gonna focus a little bit more about mental health. Okay, so I finally read The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath, and I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm not going to talk about this in depth yet, but I am a very visual thinker, and this is just such a great visual representation of depression. So the bell jar, a bell jar. It's not in this cover, but this is the bell jar. It's separateness. It's depression. And then here are two quotes from the bell jar, which I find really relatable. The silence depressed me. It wasn't the silence of silence. It was my own silence. And another. Because wherever I sat, I would be sitting under the same glass bell jar, stewing in my own sour air. And there's this notion where when you think about labels, being diagnosed with something, it helps steer you on a direction of getting help. Seeing some kind of expert, being able to get insurance to cover something so you can get help. It gives you access, maybe connects you with someone else because of that label. You can be understood more because you were labeled by a word. And all of that makes me sad, where you have to be reduced to a label in order to get help. But also, in this separateness, in stewing in your own sour air, that your own silence is something that ends up being so upsetting, is the lack of empowerment, or what you can do about it, what you can do about the situation that you're in yourself. Like, yes, labels might give you access, it could make you maybe get help by another person, but I think a lot of depression too is how much are you helping yourself, maybe advocating for yourself. Just thoughts that are impactful. Can't talk about mental health without talking about our current situation with screens, social media, and I want to share this quote by Stephen Hayes. Stephen Hayes, I'll talk about again. A Liberated Mind is the book that this quote is from. But Stephen Hayes is the founder of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is definitely a guidepost to the principles that I have as an occupational therapist and as a coach. But this is a great quote. Metaphorically, we walk in circles, watching silly TV shows, surfing the net, posting to our Facebook page, while waiting for a sense of wholeness or peace of mind or purpose to arrive. The rug scratches of distraction, avoidance, and indulgence are not changing anything of importance. We need a place where we can be comfortable. In the original, etymological sense of that word, comfortable, with calm, strength, fort, like built like a fort, from the Latin fortis. Living with our strength in the world requires far more of us than distraction, avoidance, and indulgence. If you want to find peace of mind and purpose, you'll have to let go of finding a way out and instead pivot towards finding a way in. I am actually aware that this is easier said than done. Finding a way in. Yeah, maybe you're in this glass jar in your silence, but Is there a way for you to find a way in? And then this I got from Substack. On my scroll, somebody shared it. Pretty shitty how baseline human activities like singing, dancing, and making art got turned into skills instead of being seen as behaviors. So now it's like the point of doing them is to get good at them, not this is a thing humans do, the way birds sing and bees make hives. Doing is something I struggle with personally because I am a doer. I could be very productive. I'm always doing something. And a lot of times the thing that I think will help me is not doing something for my career. It's not cleaning my house. It's the things that I want to do that I don't let myself do is something like singing. Something where it just makes there is no reason for doing it other than a reason for you that's very personal that you do that thing. For me, singing is it's almost like screaming. It's like a way to scream. And growing up I was in choirs, so it's kind of like we could all scream together. And you create these vibrations and moments of stillness, and it's just really beautiful. But it's just art. It's just music. There's no optimization. Anyone can sing. So I'm an occupational therapist, and doing is very important. A very important concept to understand from the framework and from the lens, the perspective of being an occupational therapist. So when we think about the point of doing something, not to be good at it, not to make it your job, just to do it, the way that birds sing and bees make hives, as occupational therapists, we truly believe that all beings are occupational beings. And I'm going to dive into what that means. But all animals are doing things all the time, not to be productive. They obviously don't have money or things. It's just to live. You could say to survive, but you could say to make shelter. You could say to take care of your young. But also, did you know that elephants have funerals? Whales sing, right? So all beings are doers. Now, what makes humans different, obviously, is our consciousness, our cognitive capacity, language. We walk on 2 feet, we have upright posture, and because of that, because of our upright posture, because we can walk on 2 feet, we also have more access to the world. Our eyes have developed the way that they have. We have, dexterity. And then here's a quote from a mathematician and philosopher, best known for developing a humanistic approach to science. The evolution of the brain, of the hand, of the eyes, of the feet, of the teeth, of the whole human frame made a special gift of man, fast in evolution and richer and more flexible in behavior. He has not what other animals possess. He has what no other animal possesses, a jigsaw of faculties which alone make him creative. So all of this other biological capacities that we have ultimately give us more access to creativity. Creation in the form of art and music, creation and joy, creation and sorrow. And that quote it's from Anne Wilcock. I don't know if it's in this or in something else, but that's where I came about that. Okay, so everybody's occupational beings, and as humans, we are master creators. So let me now introduce you to Adolf Meyer. So Adolf Meyer, early supporter of occupational therapy, he started psychobiology. So even before the biopsychosocial, if you're a clinician listening to this, you know what that is. He founded this approach of psychobiology based treatment combined with on the combined life experiences and physiological and biological data of patients. He recommended taking detailed life histories of patients. He listened to people's stories, revolutionizing case records. Meyer viewed individuals holistically as organisms that interact and adapt with their environment. And then here's a quote by him. Human ideals and unfortunately and usually have been steeped in dreams of timeless eternity, and they have never included an equally religious valuation of actual time and its meaning and wholesome rhythms. The awakening to a full meaning of time as the biggest wonder and asset of our lives, and the valuation of opportunity and performance as the greatest measure of time. Those are the beacon lights of the philosophy of the occupational worker. So already back, I don't know what year he said that, but I don't know, 1920 or something like that, maybe. I'm guessing I should have written it down, but he's talking about time and about performance as the greatest measure of time, which is interesting. And then here's Mary Riley. Unfortunately, we are not related, but she has my favorite quote ever, said in 1961. Man or person, through the use of his hands as they are energized by mind and will, can influence the state of his own health. Man, through the use of his hands as they are energized by mind and will, can influence the state of his own health. So we know this, what you do influences your health, but it's deeper than that, right? That's said very simply. So what is occupation? I looked back at old dictionaries, and I took some pictures of some. So this one's from 1911. And in 1911, an occupation is occupying a country. It's more of a military definition, but you do have what occupies one, meaning of filling one's time, temporary or regular, business, calling, pursuit. This one is from 1919. Let's see. Occupies time and attention. One's principal business in life, a calling, a trade, business, profession, pursuit, vocation is mentioned. So, pursuit is an occupation derived voluntarily to a given end. Your calling is now generally used in the sense of one's regular business or profession. Vocation, the more elevated term, is often exactly equivalent to calling, but may retain the suggestion of employment or being called by some higher power. I knew it was in there somewhere. It's at the end. So it could be, okay, your employment, or you're called by some higher power to spend your time in some way. And then this is from the 80s, where calling is now dropped and we're back to being employed, to have an occupation, but also taking up time and space. But it says that it's rare, a rare definition. And occupational therapy is now in the dictionary. An activity, this one's from it's from the 80s. An activity, mental or physical, prescribed as an aid to recovery from disease or injury, or for mental patients. Occupational therapist, someone skilled in supervising or trained to supervise such an activity. So it's interesting how that definition goes from something more of a spiritual definition, how you spend your time, how you take up space, and also your profession, how you work. So yeah, I think it's very interesting that occupation is used to describe paid employment, as if all the other things that we do in our lives aren't important. Occupation is central to humanness. People identify themselves and others by what they do. So I am an occupational therapist. I am a personal trainer. I say that. Maybe you can infer that I work in a gym. I work with people. You tell me you're a mom. I can then make some kind of perception about you, about being a mother. We identify ourselves as a way to try to unite with someone else, a way to try to be understood, whether it's a diagnosis, like a medical diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, or the roles we have in our lives. It's central to who we are. It's very natural for us to do. Okay, so now I am going to go back into talking about the bell jar and the very famous quote. But before I do that, so the fig tree analogy is what's most famous about the bell jar. But and what I see, most people talk about that analogy. But what's interesting to me is that before that analogy was given, she talked about the fig tree before that. So in this book, Esther Greenwood, I believe was her last name, she's the protagonist, and this book is loosely based on Sylvia Plath, who ended up losing her life to unaliving herself, unfortunately, but very famous poet. And then this is the only book that she's written. But in this book, Esther, she ends up her mother admits her into a psychiatric institution, and yeah, it's very much about being a woman and mental health, this book. So one thing that jumped out at me as I was reading is that occupational therapy is mentioned, which is very cool because that's very rare that people know what it is, but that it's mentioned in a book. But it's talked about in the context of mental health in the book. Oh, Esther, just talking to her mother, I wish you would cooperate. They say you don't cooperate. They say you won't talk to any of the doctors or make anything in occupational therapy. Esther says, I've got to get out of here, I told her meaningly. Then I'd be all right. You got to get me out of here, I said. You got me in here. You get me out. Which, there we go with that. Victim mindset, I guess is a way to say it, or I need you to fix me kind of mindset. Just observations. But so, the fig tree is mentioned before the fig tree analogy, and she's talking about this story of this Jewish man and a nun picking figs, and every day they'd go out at the same time, and together they'd pick figs, and then they'd go back, and one day they saw a bird hatching in a nest in the fig tree. And then after that, the nun didn't come back, and instead she sent the cook out to go get the figs. And then I forget if it was the Jewish man or the cook, but then they were like micromanaging the figs and always counted to make sure they had an equal amount after that. And the nun never came back out. So that was the story. But what was interesting to me about that story was she said her favorite part of the story was that the fig tree described in winter, in the snow, and the fig tree described as green in the spring. And whenever I see book reviews, they always say the famous fig tree part, but they never talk about this part. And just the life cycles of a tree, and how we know that trees have to they have to drop all their leaves every winter in order to bloom again. That's just how plants work. So I thought that was interesting, because when you think about something like depression, maybe you're more in a winter phase, and it's harder to bloom again. But Esther really loved both aspects of the winter and the blooming of the fig tree. Also, what people talk about a lot is that when she's thinking about this this fig tree. She's sitting at the bottom of it and she's starving. And some people talk about it as if, oh, she's only having this analogy because she's hungry. But I think starving is a metaphor. It could be multiple things. It could be that her needs aren't being met, so she's starving. Starving is also like when you're starving, you want food. It's like there's a desire there for something else. I don't think starving means that you're content with being starving. When you're hungry, you're desiring food and for your needs to be met. So I think any time that somebody maybe is going through a depression, that's something to think about. Maybe it's a season of life that they have to have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be stewing in their sour air. So that brings me to another book that I read, The Power of Gentleness. I have Anne's other book on risk currently sitting on my shelf, but books tell you when they want to be read. But this was another totally encapsulating read that I want to share. Some parts that made me think about all of this. But so in The Power of Gentleness. In today's age, it has become intolerable to withdraw ourselves. Or else this withdrawal must be announced, scheduled, and registered. The secret garden is identified by a sign, which means it's no longer secret. Gentleness is in this withdrawal, which is accompanied by its secondary virtues: tact, sorry, I have an issue with reading out loud sometimes. Subtlety, reserve, discretion. To not show ourselves, I wrote this, to not see ourselves is probably what that was, aside, and to guard ourselves are crowned by the last mystery that allows thinking, a certain suspension of identity. So this is another thing there. It's not useful for our society for people to be depressed. So why wouldn't we label it as something's wrong? But, I mean, wouldn't it be natural that we want to withdraw from time to time? And if we approached that withdrawal with this gentleness versus a label like depression, would that make anything be different? Today, which we call depression, is one of the major ways we deny our need for gentleness. The lack of gentleness is endemic. It has created a form of isolation as potent as a curse. No wealth, no sentimental reassurance can break it. I don't think people need to be fixed. I don't think depression is something that needs to be fixed. All right. So now that we talked about that, let's go to the famous quote. I saw my life branching out before me like a fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig. A wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children. And another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant scholar. And another fig was E.G., the amazing editor. And another fig was Europe and Africa and South America. And another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Italia. And a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions. And another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion. And beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all of the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. So some people read that as in, you need to choose a life path. You need to make a decision. just choose what you want to do. Choose which fig you want to eat and go for it. You know, more of this kind of like yang energy about it. And then other people, including myself, say, why do you have to choose? Because first, let's just say you choose the husband and a happy home and children. Or let's say you choose the travel. In all of these choices, there's an assumption. You're making some kind of some kind of judgment on what that fig means. But if I learned anything from the Bernstein Bears and its Stranger book, it's sometimes you could pick an apple and it's a rotten apple. So maybe you'll pick a fig and it doesn't end up being the thing that you want. So then you pivot in life. So it's not that you choose one thing and everything rots at the ground. Another fig will grow after the next winter. And I think that's a kinder way to see identity. It's not one thing that you choose and you're locked into that. I chose to be a runner, and a runner I will be. I don't think we're supposed to be like that as humans. So when it comes to choosing an identity and that identity shapes what we do, I don't like to think about it that harshly. So now let's go back to occupation. So we are going to do something all the time. No matter what, we're doing something because we're occupational beings. And that doing something generally falls into these three categories. This is now back from the framework. Sleep and rest, necessity, and something that is chosen. And we can look at this and we can look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we need to fulfill the bottom of this pyramid first, and then we go up. So sure, you can see it that way. But to me, when I look at this, I know that we're occupational beings, and no matter what, we're going to create. And I think that is just as important as sleep and food and breathing. And how many stories do you know of people that are poor and they become these great artists? So I don't think it's like a prerequisite chart, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But I mean, I don't know. I'm just a 34-year-old lady. So I think about that. And then I didn't write this. Who said this? I'm pretty sure it's Anne. I'm pretty sure this is a quote from Anne Wilcock on doing. But doing entails more than simply acquiring requirements for survival. Because physiological and innate biological mechanisms are informed, stimulated, influenced, and adapted by conscious social processes, these too become influential determinants of human health. For positive health, people need what they do to offer meaning, choice, satisfaction, a sense of belonging, purpose, and achievement. These enable families, communities, and populations to flourish and provide species with a survival advantage. It's not just about surviving. It's about everything else we're talking about. Meaning, choice, satisfaction, maybe freedom. Okay, so how do we choose what we do? How do we know what's meaningful, what's purposeful? We know, what I've outlined is that we're occupational beings, we're going to be doing something. Even when you are resting, that is doing something. Rest and restoration is an occupation. So now how do we choose? What goes into what's meaningful for you? And now I'd like to talk about ACT. ACT is acceptance and commitment therapy. It's similar to a way of thought like cognitive behavioral therapy. It's evidence-based, but it's more so principles-based. It's not about protocols. That's how I treat the physical body, and that's also my framework for the mind. And it's said, and you say it, ACT. ACT is a standardized test. So it said ACT, and Stephen Hayes is the founder of ACT. But generally, I won't go too crazy into this, but what life is asking us all to learn is to learn to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a meaningful life, while scaling that to our body and our relationships. Do I have extra bits here? Okay, so this Hexaflex has changed a lot over time, and I think they're about to come out with another book going more into this open, aware, and engaged that's fairly new. But I'm going to talk more about psychological flexibility, but psychological flexibility relates to these 6 other elements here. Emotional flexibility or acceptance, cognitive flexibility, diffusion. Simply put, that's like saying you're diffusing thoughts. So it's not I'm anxious, it's I'm experiencing anxiety. So you detach your being from the label. Attentional flexibility, that's just being in the present. Flexible perspective taking, so that's I can see it from my point of view, but also I can see it from your point of view looking at me. Chosen purpose, or your values, and then behavioral flexibility, or values-based habits, committed action. So psychological flexibility is the ability to feel and think with openness, to attend voluntarily to your experience of the present moment, and to move your life in directions that are important to you. Building habits that allow you to live life in accordance to your values and aspirations. It's about learning not to turn away from what's painful, instead turning towards your suffering in order to live a life full of meaning and purpose. If you've never heard anyone speak like that before, that might sound weird to you. To me, I work with people who are in chronic pain all the time, and that's what you have to do. You can't ignore your pain. You can't be afraid of your pain. Feeling pain is very much so part of being human. If you are interested in what I'm saying, a liberated mind is a great way, whether you're a clinician or not, to start learning about ACT. Pain and purpose are 2 sides of the same thing. A person struggling with depression is very likely a person yearning to feel fully. A socially anxious person is very likely a person yearning to connect with others. You hurt where you care, and you care where you hurt. So, that I'm not singing, and that is so painful to me, it just means that I care about it. It's kind of a silly example, but it's not something I need to weaponize against myself or say I'm self-sabotaging because I'm not letting myself sing, or try to like make, all these assumptions about myself. I could just acknowledge that it upsets me that I don't sing anymore. It is painful, and that just means that I still care about it. When it comes to now using that for how then you do something about it. So here are just some other bits about ACT. Your committed actions. So committed actions is just another way of saying doing. This is just, instead of Anne Wilcox's framework for doing, it's just called committed action. You clarify your values, and you can act on them now. There are no prerequisites. This is a very important aspect to understand about ACT and your values. A lot of times when people teach about values, they give like a list of values, and it's like, okay, we'll choose your values, and it's like, okay, well, I have to do something in order to get these values, and more on that in a little bit. I'm going to talk a bit about Aristotle and moral excellences. It's like you work towards being moral, but in ACT, if I wanted to be kind, I can choose kindness right this second, which leads to the next point, that the present is the only place that action is possible. So I care about knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing is a value of mine. So I am sitting here in my free time doing this because to me it's valuable that maybe you'll want to read one of these books, or you'll want to maybe incorporate doing, being, becoming, or act into your practice, and you can help someone, and that is valuable to me. So I'm choosing to spend my present moment here and now doing this. Another important aspect of being in the present moment is mindfulness, but an important distinction is mindfulness is not about feeling calm, but it's noticing about what's happening in the moment, observing thoughts without controlling them, and choosing values-based action. So I'm also a yoga teacher. I don't currently teach, but I've been through the whole 200-hour certification and spent my time in that way. But I found the same thing through yoga's teachings, in that this psychological flexibility aspect, that you're not trying to control the things that are going around you. You're just noticing. No judgments, no assumptions. You're just noticing. Values are personal and meaningful. You act about what you care about, what matters to you. You do not have to feel good to do good. This is kind of foreshadowing to how I'm going to end this talk. You can feel anxious and be kind. You can feel sad and laugh. You can be certain about the future. You could be uncertain about the future and act with purpose. There's no prerequisites when it comes to act, and that's what I really like about it, in this anti-optimization way of being that I'm trying to step more into. I'm rejecting the optimization, and maybe this is me leaning into my biases, but okay. So ethics. I have not read this myself yet, but of course, as I'm like thinking about what meaning means, and my algorithm is giving me stuff, Stoicism and Aristotle, and all these male philosophers always come up in the algorithms. So I've looked into it a bit, but I have not read this myself yet. So these are some of the questions that I've had. So Aristotle is all about living a good life. I'm more concerned with living a meaningful life. A good life is flourishing through virtue and purpose. Or can you just have a meaningful life, meaning vitality, and choosing meaning over comfort? It's not always comfortable to choose the meaningful thing. How can we decide what is right for another person? When I think about morals and the morals that people have and just how different we all are, it actually kind of helps me when, really negative, awful things are happening in the world, that, I'm not choosing what that other person is, I'm not choosing their morals. Like, it's not like there's this one blanket way of being. And then, can you build a meaningful life despite your social context? These are all, I don't have answers. Some of these things that I write are just literally from my journal. And then maybe when I write this, I'll tangent and maybe something will come to me, but obviously it's not coming to me right now. Do we need to pursue well-being directly? Does happiness need to be the goal? This is a big one for me because when I was younger, just feeling really upset, I would cry, and I would journal over and write over and over and over again. I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And I would just pray to feel happy. And I think through, maybe I was 12, 13, 14, when those tears were so strong for me, those specific tears on wanting to be happy. And I do feel like through my teens and my 20s, God was like, let me show you that happiness is not the thing. And now I'm here making this video. I don't think happiness is the goal. Maybe it's for others, though, because it's not up to me what's right for another person. who you are is built through what you do. I do believe that. And behavior shapes the self just as much as the self shapes behavior. Those things I find to be true. Oh no. Oh no. I obviously started doing the next one. Okay, here we are. Okay, so those are the things that I'm thinking about as I'm going into this research. And then, what did I say here? We're almost done. The difference between values and virtues. So both provide a direction for behavior, both support a meaningful life, both require consistency, but values are what you believe in that guide behavior, and they're what matter to you. Virtues are moral excellences, character traits. They're always positive, and they're who you are morally. An act, we are cautious of virtues. They're rules imposed from the outside and could be a source of self-judgment or rigidity. They could fuse with identity. An act, our values are free of judgment and emphasis on a vital life, not a perfectly moral life. I think it's tough to ask yourself to be moral all the time. I think it's, oh damn it, why do I keep doing that? I'm gonna curse. You know, like things aren't gonna be perfect all the time. Okay, so to wrap this up, which I bring that kind of stuff up because I can't talk about doing and meaning, I think, without giving other explanations other than act. So maybe if that seems interesting to you, maybe that's a way that you can figure out what's a meaningful way of doing and being in your life. This is another cover of the bell jar, which I love because I love the visual of a spiral, especially when it comes to growth. Healing and change is not linear. It's not like everything's just gonna keep getting better. Life is more like a roller coaster, so to speak. And I like thinking of this spiral because as time goes on, you're never in the same point twice. And there might be ups and downs, but you're always expanding. So it's not like your life is like this. Your life is getting bigger if you're open to the lessons that you're learning in your life. I guess even if you're not open to the lessons that you're learning, you're still learning them unconsciously, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, but here was another thing about the bell jar that really resonated with me. I may have made straight A's in physics, but I was panic struck. Physics made me sick the whole time I learned it. What I couldn't stand was the shrinking of everything into letters and numbers instead of leaf shapes and enlarged diagrams of the holes the leaves breathe through, and fascinating words like carotene and xanthophyll on the blackboard. There were these hideous, cramped, scorpion letter formulas in Mr. Manzi's special red chalk. I almost didn't get into OT school because I had such a hard time conceptualizing physics. So I thought it was really interesting that Esther also had a hard time with physics, because what I'm going to talk a little bit about now and more in the next series, I mean this series, in other episodes of this series. So first is just the aspect of just kinetic and potential energy, right? So potential energy is the stored energy, depending on the position something is being held in, and then the kinetic energy is the energy in motion. I don't remember what these formulas mean, but I guess just to show this Esther's point, I too would rather go and look at a tree and try to understand life than try to understand it through the laws of nature. But nature, the laws of nature, I mean, I don't think you can really choose. It's all happening. So I like to think of kinetic and potential energy when it comes to change. When it comes to thinking about, okay, so Esther would rather sit, or could only muster the energy enough for her to sit at the base of this tree and be starving and contemplate life instead of go and living her life, whether it's just choosing something or realizing that she doesn't have to choose one thing and she can just do things in her life and feel better. I think that this notion of that we all have this potential energy or this kinetic energy, and maybe we influence something and it has mechanical energy, like that's all inside of us as well. I don't know if I did, right? Okay, so when it comes to people, so physics, energy is conserved. Human occupation can be genuinely depleted or generated through social and psychological processes. Potential energy, stored capacity, reflective stillness, containing latent possibility, kinetic energy, active, observable, in motion state, energy expressed through action, measurable while momentum occurs. It's kind of like potential energy is the winterized tree, and then kinetic energy is the blooming tree. But they both are very real, and neither of them is better than the other. But to be passionate about something is to pursue it. I don't know where I got that from. I don't know if it was my thought or somebody else's thought, but I did put it here at some point. I made this like a month ago. But there's our kinetic energy. I think like that I'm not taking singing lessons right now, for example. I love singing, but I don't think you can say that I'm passionate about it because I'm not pursuing it. I'm a winterized tree when it comes to singing right now. I could contemplate it, I can be hungry for it, but I'm not passionate about it right now because I'm not doing it. I'm not spending my time doing it. I'm not, and when we think about act, it's what you're doing in the present moment, and I'm not doing that. So I think that's something to consider when we're thinking about mental health, when we're thinking about these rest and restoration times in our lives. That you can love something and not always be passionate about it too. That doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong or inauthentic to you. So this is where I'm going to end it, is talking about flourishing and vitality. So this flourishing study, it's the global flourishing study. You can look it up if you want, but it was done 5 years, over 200,000 participants across 23 diverse countries. And everyone's talking about flourishing in like the coaching space. It's like, it's the relative attainment of a state in which all aspects of a person's life are good, including the context in which that person lives. And I too was like, I want people to flourish. That's great. Until I looked at it deeper, and there's something about it that just rubbed me the wrong way. I guess not like that. I just felt like I felt like it was incomplete because I'm reading this questionnaire about and filling it out just for myself. Happiness and life satisfaction. You already know I don't like this. Extremely unhappy or extremely happy. That's hard for me to fill out because I don't like, why are we just saying happiness? Why is happiness the goal? Why are we telling people that happiness is the goal? That's like saying pain-free is the goal to me. It's not that simple. Am I going to rate my mental health and my physical health from 0 to 10? 0 to 10 scales, maybe it's my neurodivergence, but maybe that I'm neurodivergent, but I can't think like that. I'm also not a good numbers person anyway, but I can't ever rank anything from 0 to 10. When somebody asks me to rank something from 0 to 10, to me, it's the equivalent of like trying to connect. It's like I want to see you, but I have to take 2 connecting flights to get to you. So first I have to like think about what you're asking me and try to make sense of what you're asking me, and then I have to then convert what I'm feeling into the language that you're expecting me to think in, and then say it back to you. So that I don't like that question. Purpose in life. Why do we have to have one purpose? And maybe some days you feel like you're living according to your purpose, and you have and you're being passionate about your values, and maybe another day that you're not. But does that mean that you're not flourishing if some days you rank it one way and another day that you don't? So character and virtue. I already brought that out with the Aristotle stuff. So anyway, so I already felt like this wasn't good enough of a score when it came to trying to conceptualize what is meaningful to somebody's life, or what's a good life, or what's a life we can be satisfied with, even though that's what it should be measuring. I don't know. So then I came across this study, which again, I have to wrap this up because I actually have to go back to work like now. But so I'm going to kind of rush through the end here and I'll talk more about it later. But do I have it up here? So vitality. So vitality is a self-reported measure, a self-reported measure of your energy. It's a core component of what it means to flourish in life. I think it's hard to capture on a scale. Vitality is a central consideration to the self-determination theory, a framework for understanding human motivators and personality with emphasis on inherent growth tendencies and innate psychological needs. The primary psychological needs are competence, readiness, and autonomy, and the extent to which an individual is satisfied or frustrated in meeting those needs. Vitality will be enhanced or suppressed. The self-determination theory contends that subjective reality is not simple reflection of arousal, rather, it reflects the experience of energy available to the self. Put simply, an individual could be subjectively nourished and physically rested, yet lacking in spark and vitality. I would rather talk about vitality than flourishing. The energy, we're back to the energy, the energy you have to meet your needs, that spark. It brings me back to the physics. So I'm going to talk more about this kind of oh my god, what's the word? Change in energy, transmutation of energy more. This is kind of foreshadowing, but I feel like I can't talk about it the way I want to then unless I kind of lay out the seeds now. So that's really the purpose of this video. And after I made all this and I sat and I think about it, doing is meaningful, but it doesn't always have to be it doesn't have to be purposeful. Existing is enough. Who you are in your winter seasons, in your growth seasons, they're both enough. And I do think that vitality should be looked at closer. This idea of the energy and the spark we have for life, and the idea of arousal, and what can we do when we're ready to go from the winterized tree to growth. What can we do to oh my god, and this is how I'm getting distracted. What's that word? I have a hard time finding words. Encapsulate? What can we do to the vitality? Encapsulate it? I don't know. How do we use our energy? How can we help each other use our energy better? So this is the doing part. Being will come next. Again, the point of these aren't to get to some kind of answer. It's more so just, this is just how I think all day long. I want to be able to talk to more people about just the connections that I'm making. So I'm putting it out there, and maybe you'll pick up on something that I didn't, or something I said will lead you to think about something, and you can share a book with me, or that's really just the point in all this. There is no true purpose. I'm just doing it because this is how I'm spending my time right now. Anyway, now I have to spend my time going back to work, going to coach Move Without Limits. So thank you for tuning in, and I'm doing these like monthly-ish, just when I have the energy and the spark to do it.